Hi guys, I'm Mike.
And I'm Stephen.
And this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to the Race Review podcast, where we, after the dust has settled, take a deeper look at the action from last weekend's race, the last of the first triple header of the 2020 season, which was the Hungarian GP. And what would you say? I thought it was a pretty good race. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I would say there was a lot of chaos at the start that was a bit like, I do not have a clue what's going on.
It was, I think, Styria, all the action happened at the end, whereas Hungary, a lot of the action happened first half of the race.
Yeah, and then it kind of settled into a steady pace, and there was a little bit of excitement at the end with Valtteri Bottas chasing down Max Verstappen.
Yep.
But yeah, it certainly was interesting, to say the least. But, you know, basically on our Race Review podcast, what we do is we go through each one of the teams, talk about how we thought their weekends went, and within that, obviously, if a main incident happened with that team, we then obviously talk about that in a little bit more detail, or also maybe kind of points on the drivers from there. And then we round it off with who we picked as our driver of the day. And this week, I have actually remembered to do the poll that it finishes in time for us actually to record it, so we can get your guys' thoughts on driver of the day as well as rounding off with a race rating. So if you want to kind of hang around for all of that, make sure you kind of stay for the whole video and enjoy the ride you go. And if you're new around here and enjoy the content we do on the channel, don't forget you can subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification, and keep up to date with all our latest content. And drop it a thumbs up if you like it.
I thought you were about to say kick that.
Yeah, kick it. That was a good kick. That might have been aggressive. If anyone had to kind of jump back from the stream with that kick, I do apologise.
And anyone who has now kicked their computer, phone or laptop and have broken it, we take no responsibility.
No, do not sue us. That's a very key point I think we have to make clear here. Don't sue us. Anyway, on to the Race Review podcast, talking about F1, which is why you've actually tuned into this video, not to do whatever we randomly end up doing. Williams, first team. So Williams, a tale of two halves probably in terms of qualifying. Again, looking very good. They've somehow unlocked this qualifying pace. George Russell qualifying in P12 on merit. No rain this time to kind of affect that. It was good. And Latifi as well making it into Q2, getting qualifying in P15 in the end. So very impressive. The first time that both Williams have made it into Q2 since Monza in 2018. So it's certainly been a long time since those Williams have tasted or experienced what second part of qualifying is. But on the race day, again, it was a disappointing day. The race pace just wasn't there. George Russell dropped back to the back of the field, finishing P18 ahead of teammate Latifi. George Russell, you didn't really see in the race, did you?
No.
Because he just kind of dropped back and wasn't involved really in any action.
Yeah.
Nicholas Latifi was involved in a bit more action. Unsafe pit release. Actually, were they penalised for that? I think he was.
He got 5 second time.
Yeah.
About 3 laps down on the leader, 5 second time.
I just rubbed it in on poor Nicky Latifi.
Latifi's race, because he was in 10th at that point.
He had a much better start than his teammate,
obviously
actually.
He got a puncture, which completely threw out the race. But apparently he also had floor damage as well, which would have ruined later race pace. And it's just, could Latifi have actually done it? Could he have actually brought home points?
I don't know.
Because he had a great start.
He did.
He was looking better than George.
And that's the thing. I think we're going to leave it to the first 8 races before you can properly judge where Latifi is. But he hasn't done bad at all during his time within Formula 1. And yeah, he was with that unsafe pit release, it led to him having a rear left puncture, which basically stitched up his race. Then later on, I think he may be pushing, maybe getting some data on the medium compound. I think went wide at turn 1 again and spun around. It was just it turned out what could have been a very good day at the office for Nicholas Latifi into quite a poor one.
Yeah. Through no fault of his own, really.
Yeah. So,
yes.
next
on
team.
to the next team. And that is Alfa Romeo. The new boys at the back of the pack, basically, now. Felt a bit sorry for Williams, so thought they'll join them in a complete lack of race pace. Not to be harsh or anything.
But it's true.
Yep, so Gio ended up finishing 17th, and Kimi wasn't much better in 16th.
Correct. They went 2 by 2 at the back of the field.
Kimi had a great start, but Alfa Romeo race pace. What can we say? I think it's a bit more than that Ferrari power unit being downgraded from last season, because they're not even near Haas. So yeah, really struggling at the back, Kimi and Gio, and not really showing that they deserve that seat next season.
I'm trying to think back. I'm not sure if Alfa Romeo were one of the teams before testing to fail the crash test, which basically
that doesn't sound good.
Which I think Williams failed the previous year. That if you basically fail that, then you're having to go back, and I think that rushes development. And I think it was always going to be a tough season after they failed that. It was going to be a bit of a we cocked up type thing. But it does look well off the pace, and with Williams' qualifying pace, if they can find a way of translating that and unlocking that into race pace, it to me looks like Alfa Romeo, obviously Alfa Romeo, Sauber in the past, how they've been probably over the last 10 years, more drifting back. They've made good progress in the last couple of years, even being competitive in the midfield at the start of last season in the hands of Kimi Räikkönen, but it seems like they've just drifted, while others are kind of, stepped up their game. Unfortunately for Alfa Romeo, not to be.
Especially on those Saturdays. Back row lockout for Alfa. Oh,
it's not a good.
It's tough.
We tried to make Alfa great again, but maybe they're a lost cause. Who knows on that front? But anyway, we move on to the third team looking at, and a team that, well, we were talking about it last week, and that they look like a team that their qualifying pace is poor. It's the reverse of the 2019 season, but they've actually got some pretty good race pace in that car. And we definitely saw that. But also, they put the full wets on Magnussen at start and inters on Grosjean, and everyone had kind of started these. And it was the chaos at the start of the race, because within 1 or 2 laps, everyone had changed onto slick tyres because they'd realised they'd made the wrong decision. Haas decided that they would call their drivers in on the formation lap to change to slicks, and this benefited them that they were actually at one point running in 3rd and 4th, and Magnussen managed to finish the race in P9 and Grosjean managed to finish the race in P15. But after the race, both drivers received a 10-second penalty for receiving driver aid, as the FIA said, pre-race. If they told them to change their tyres during the race, that would have been fine. This feels like a stupid rule. I'm going to put that out there. Rules are rules, but it does feel like they haven't really gained a massive advantage. Like every other team would have had the opportunity to do that. It wasn't like they were doing top secret in terms of their. It was clearly a public. They made that decision. Daniel Kvyat was asking to come on, and his team turned him against it. It seemed a really good strategy call by Haas that worked out with, it would have been 2 points for their driver, but still 1 point in the end is, good for them. It seems in a team that has had so many kind of kicking them while they're down things, it was another thing to go, just let them have a good day. Come on.
All it simply was telling them to box, and that was a driver aid. Yeah.
That rule needs to be looked at.
Good job, FIA.
I get it's probably in rules now, but it needs to be looked at to go. I think this incident has highlighted that maybe that's a little bit stupid and it's not really gaining an unfair advantage over anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of that. If they're asking someone to pit, if they're giving like some, I don't know, certain engine modes or anything within that formation lap, then that's maybe something a little bit different, and maybe that's what it was kind of brought into initially. But tyres seems a little bit stupid on that front to go. But Magnussen outperforming Grosjean, although Sam O'Gara mentioned to us, I didn't find it, but I presume he wasn't lying to us, although he is a fan of Grosjean. When Albon went past Grosjean, he actually damaged his front wing, or there was maybe a front wing there, which naturally would have affected the performance of Grosjean, and maybe explains why he was so far back from Kevin Magnussen. But I think it is still safe to say that Kevin Magnussen is definitely a lot more comfortable in that Haas car this year than Roman Grosjean is.
Yeah. Grosjean is struggling to impress. I think he made a comment pre-weekend, not sounding too optimistic that he wants to stay in the sport. I think he said he was tired for not challenging for a win or something like that. So I think this is Grosjean's last year, unless Haas give him a winning car in 2020, which isn't going to happen.
I'd love to see Grosjean compete in another series. I think if you go and put him in a competitive car, if you put him in an IndyCar, I think he'd probably be quite a good IndyCar driver. Definitely, but he's shown, I think, in the past no expression for driving on oval, so therefore that pretty much rules out that. But I don't know, maybe he might just go and start a cooking channel with his wife. that could be quite. He's good at that, and he's a lovely man, Roman Grosjean. So maybe that's the path to kind of go down.
I'm sure. Yeah.
But Haas done. Next one up,
AlphaTauri, the no man's land team, quicker than the Ferrari powered cars, slower than the Renault powered cars, or McLaren and Renault. Gasly, Mr. Unlucky, just about made it through. Did he have a failure in practice as well?
I'm not sure. Practice may have been. It was qualifying that he then had to have his engine replaced, which then his new engine blew up in the race
because of the gearbox or something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So poor Gasly was probably on for a very good result. Equally, Kvyat, who ended up finishing
P12,
could have also had a very good result because, as you mentioned earlier, he was as far as we know, the only driver to ask to come in for slicks on the formation lap. If he had done that, he probably would have been ahead of the Hasses.
And the team said no.
And then look where Kevin Magnussen finished 9th in the end. Kvyat would have been in a quicker car. Maybe he would have got 8th or 7th. Maybe nicked some good points for AlphaTauri. But unfortunately, they didn't pit, and he spent most of the race in the bottom half of the table, not doing too much.
But starting P17 and finishing P12 wasn't bad in the end. Yep. It was a solid performance from him, and like we said, it seems the bottom of, I don't even know, there's kind of categories within it, but there's kind of like Alfa, Romeo, Williams. They're like a category.
Yeah.
Then it's like Haas and AlphaTauri, with AlphaTauri I think have the slight advantage in that relationship, but Haas potentially in the race pace have something to compete with them. And then it's the Renaults, the McLarens, Ferraris in the next bracket. Then it's Racing Point and Red Bull, and then it's Mercedes. Yeah. It's a weird kind of bracket going from there. But
But Kvyat did beat Ocon and Norris.
So it was a very positive performance. He drove well.
Yeah.
And
it's just, what if they had brought him in on that formation lap? Could have been a very good weekend for Kvyat.
I thought you were going to say, what if they had promoted him to the Red Bull team? But that's a story for another day. But yeah, I think Daniel Kvyat's again going there, and I think he will definitely be someone that's looked at by other teams, because I don't think he has a future at Red Bull. Maybe Haas replacing Roman Grosjean, they might go for someone like Daniel Kvyat as well, and he might like that with a Ferrari link to maybe in the view of one day getting a Ferrari seat, but we'll see that.
Yeah. Quite an optimistic path. But
he test drove for them, and it's not out of the realms, but Ferrari have some very good juniors coming through.
Yeah.
So he'd have to be pretty stand out in a Haas car to do anything on that path. But yes, that rounds up AlphaTauri. And we now move on to Ferrari. Now a comfortable addition into the midfield team.
Had a great midfield performance here, snatching 6th.
It feels so weird talking about Ferrari way before Red Bull and Mercedes, but that's literally where they are. So I suppose that's where you're gone. Their drivers very much had a tale of two parts. Sebastian Vettel said we should go on the mediums, like everybody else. That was a good decision. That's what Sebastian Vettel did. Charles Leclerc listened to Ferrari. Stupid Charles. Because they put him on the soft tyres when everyone pitted at the start. And clearly Ferrari hadn't watched the F2 and F3 because the tyre degradation was awful. He then had to pit far earlier for the hards. He was racing very well with Lando Norris at the back. He couldn't catch a Haas of Kevin Magnussen.
No, solid 10 seconds there.
Because of his tyres. And he also got overtaken late on by Carlos Sainz because his tyres dropped off a cliff. And the fact that he could have even still got into the points, but because his tyres had gone so much at the end with that 10-second penalty from Magnussen, he still finished over 10 seconds behind Kevin.
Not a great day. Not his fault though, similar to, who was I saying before, Latifi. Bad day at the office, but no fault of his own. No,
and there was some of the best action actually came with Charles Leclerc.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think maybe Lance Stroll dive on it, Alexander Albon, and I think Charles fight for a bit. The Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc fight was an interesting one as well.
Both McLarens with signs as well.
Yeah, correct. It was there was some brilliant defending and fights definitely going on in that battle, and yeah, some of the best action from the race actually came from Charles Leclerc. So thank you, Charles, for entertaining us. Sebastian Vettel, on the other hand, drove P6. I think probably got the maximum out of that Ferrari, and still made mistakes. Had a 7-second penalty. He had mistakes to let Albon through a couple of times during the race. I think running wide, was it at turn 2? I think for
not
Albon.
Such an impressive defensive display from Vettel, but 6th, still solid points for Ferrari.
Yeah, but again, I don't know what the tyre degradation was like on Seb, because that was quite near the end of the race, I think.
No, I think there was one that was quite early on in one of his stints.
Oh, well, fair enough. Yeah. Seb copped it.
I think it was there was one near the beginning and then one near the end as well.
But yeah, with Ferrari, it just... I didn't think we'd be going into this season where we'd be saying P6 is a good result for Ferrari today. But that's where we are. And P6 was a good result for Ferrari.
Yep. More points than McLaren, who's currently in that 3rd spot. So yeah, that's their target at the moment, beat McLaren.
That's absolutely their fight.
Now moving on to a Renault, and one good day, one not so good day, and I'll start with Esteban Ocon, who finished P14 in the end with a last lap overtake from Lando Norris again. Not so spectacular as his other last lap overtakes in the Cup previous weeks, but Norris made the move on the last lap. Ocon P14, not great. Really not great. Struggling with race pace. Maybe he had problems. I don't think he did though. I haven't seen anything that Ocon was suffering from anything. Way off the pace, finishing behind both McLarens, Daniel Kvyat's AlphaTauri, and his teammate, who finished in 8th, Daniel Ricciardo, who had a very strong first stint but went very long, like Ricciardo has been doing recently, managing those tyres very well. Struggled a bit on the second stint and couldn't really... He was in touch and range of Checo Perez for the second half of the race, but couldn't make any progress to now 7th at the end.
I don't know if it's like an issue with Renault in terms of their tyre warming or getting new tyres into the window quick enough, because it's been a theme in the past couple of races of Ricciardo not having as strong as second stint as he should. Even going so long into that first stint, having fresher tyres. He was on the softer compound in the Styrian GP, but for some reason it didn't pay off. But it was still, they gambled on rain coming. and I think they lost the initiative. They might have even finished ahead of Checo in terms of if they'd managed to pit him earlier.
Maybe,
because they held him out longer in anticipation for rain and looking to save a pit stop on that front. But obviously the rain never came and had to pit him anyway. But by that time he'd already lost the time.
Yeah, I think a few teams were holding their drivers out a bit, looking out for that rain. But yeah.
But Esteban Ocon, I think, well, a lot of people were going into this season going, it's going to be really interesting to see Esteban Ocon come in and challenge Daniel Ricciardo. You know, he could have beaten Sergio Perez, and yes, he could. Yes, he could in that kind of second season, and he definitely. I think it's far too early again. I think you've got to wait until about 8 races before you judge Esteban Ocon on the return, because he's getting that rust off. It is a difference, and he's had a difficult return into F1 with obviously the whole COVID-19 situation, and it's probably worse for him than Latifi, because although he technically tested some cars for Mercedes, he pretty much had a year out of racing.
Yeah.
So it's
most of the weekends he was just standing in the garage. Yeah.
So it's been a difficult one for Esteban Ocon, but he's certainly looking a way off Daniel Ricciardo at the moment, and you know. I think it goes a lot of people going, maybe Ocon could have been the man to lead the team. I think we're now seeing that may be a bit of a gamble. He may turn it around in a few races' time and be challenging Danny Rick, but early signs are suggesting that he's not the man ready to lead a Renault team as things currently stand.
Yeah.
McLaren, the other Renault-powered car on the grid, well, certainly for the 2021 season going forwards, it'll be the last season that we have 2 different teams powered by Renault engines for the meantime, at least. But yeah, McLaren are still a customer with Renault at the moment, and we spoke about it last week that this race was actually going to be very interesting to see, you know, where McLaren actually were, because the last kind of lap instance, they were very good at capitalising on situations. That you know, very good opportunities that presented themselves to them, that may have inflated where their race pace actually was. And I think with Hungary, it's kind of gone, yeah, the McLaren maybe isn't as good as what it was last year. Or maybe, well, obviously Racing Point have leapfrogged up, Ferrari have gone down, but McLaren and Renault, I remember interviews with Cyril at the back end of the 2019 season going, us and McLaren are actually pretty close, and you know, we're still hunting for P4 in the constructors. And I think he got laughed at pretty much at the time. But I think the season's starting to show, especially in the hands of Daniel Ricciardo, that maybe isn't too hard to believe this season.
Yeah, they were really struggling in Hungary. Obviously, Sainz just grabbing a point at the end. Well, ended up being 2 points with Magson's demotion. But yeah, after very good points returns in the first 2 rounds, only getting 2 points from Hungary, it was a bit... Yeah, it would be interesting to see. Apparently they got quite a few upgrades coming in for Silverstone. So, obviously, Hungary and Silverstone, fairly similar in terms of quite high downforce tracks. It'll be interesting to see how they do there. And whether it was just a one-off blip in Hungary, or if they're still showing the pace they did in Austria.
Yeah, obviously, you know, I think the McLaren's strength is its out and out, maybe straight line speed. And so obviously there are those more straights. There's the kind of main pit straight, there's the old national pit straight, and there's Kemmel Straight. No, not Kemmel Straight, that's in Spa. And there's the kind of Hanger Straight as well. And you know, there's these long kind of acceleration zones that you can really show off the car, and I think the McLaren in straight line speeds are pretty good. So I would expect a better performance in Silverstone, but if there isn't a better performance in Silverstone, maybe we then need to start asking questions of McLaren and go, they're better, certainly. I'm going to be a devil's advocate
here we go.
Here's one. Here's an interesting one for viewers to go. Andreas Seidel came out last year and said that Stoffel van Dorn and Fernando Alonso's work that they did at the back of the 2018 season was key, actually, to success that the 2019 season car had. With a season of development with Lando Norris, who would have not much experience in that area, and Carlos Sainz, still relatively young and inexperienced himself.
Yep.
Would the development feedback that they were getting from the driver mean that it stagnated compared to the feedback they were getting from Stoffel, who was quite an experienced junior coming in, even though I think he's 27 now, so I think he was about 24, 25, similar sort of age to Carlos, but also Fernando, with the wealth of experience he has. A lot of people think that he doesn't develop a car, but I think he was actually quite key in that.
Yeah.
Is that actually showing that now that they bring in Daniel Ricciardo, I think McLaren will be in a much better state than that they are actually with Carlos Sainz and Lando?
Yeah. We were saying that, not to try and jump around, but like with Red Bull as well, with the young drivers, there isn't that experience driving the development too much. Like we see with Mercedes, with Lewis, all-knowing Lewis, he's fully with the engineers and mechanics, can spend the whole week with them after a bad result trying to perfect the car. And it's that experience that can really boost the car's performance, not just the sole driver.
Yeah, and I think Lando is trying, because there were pictures, obviously, about him staying after the Grand Prix.
Yeah, helping strip the car down.
And it's building that relationship that's going to help. And it's not saying Lando's rubbish at it, but he can't actually be better than guys who have done it for years on the grid. Experience is exactly that. It takes time to develop, and Lando can't have that. And maybe that lack of race pace and understanding of kind of getting that race pace will stagnate a little bit this season, and then it may for 2021, but going into 2022, I think Lando's development knowledge, or his kind of pursuit of trying to improve that, will be a lot better. Daniel Ricciardo is very good at it, and I think it's something that Red Bull have missed. Like I said, not jumping around too much, I think, from there. But yeah, I think definitely on that front.
And just one more thing on McLaren. 2 more 7-second pit stops. Obviously, it got a bit chaotic with everyone diving in. He had to wait for traffic a bit. But yeah, not a great day for the pit stop crews again. Kind of, it put Lando out in traffic so he can really recover after his poor start. And then, yeah.
It's certainly an area that's probably underrated in gaining and losing time. You know, Max, Red Bull, that's probably keeping, that maybe made Max get that position, was the fact that he had a 2-second flat pit stop.
Yeah.
So
they were about a second quicker than Mercedes. So, yeah.
That is literally the difference between him being overtaken by Valtteri Bottas and not being overtaken by Valtteri Bottas. And so McLaren, the drivers may be trying their best, but yeah, they can't shoot themselves in the foot with that. But they'll come back to it, and I'm sure in their home Grand Prix at Silverstone, there will be a good performance by McLaren, by all parties, definitely on that front. But we move on to Racing Point.
Oh yeah, Racing Point, pink Mercedes, looking very good in the hands of Lance Stroll.
Sorry?
Last week it was about the charging Checo, but no one could stop him other than Alex Albon. And yes, enough said. But yeah, this week, Lance Stroll, we didn't really see him, but he had a pretty faultless performance. Started in 3rd and finished in 4th, but that was behind both the Mercedes and Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, which is to be expected. Didn't do anything wrong, drove a very solid race, and was, spot on. There weren't the overtakes Checo had last week, but he didn't have to. He just did. We don't normally praise Lance Stroll.
Well, he maintained position. He was driving 2nd at the time, and Max was just very good that he got the overcut, actually, wasn't it, on the pit stop? Because he stayed out an extra lap because he thought it's going to be hell busy, let me stay out a lap and then I can kind of do that, which turned out to be a very good decision for Max in the end and set him up for a good race.
Yeah, I think Max overcut him and then Bottas undercut him in the next pit stops.
Yeah, so it was a little bit unlucky, I suppose, on that front, and I think Lance actually openly came out and said he was a little bit disappointed they weren't brave on the thing, which it's crazy. Lance is talking like a top driver. He's expecting...
He's like in a top team and he's very experienced and he's demanding more from the team.
Which is crazy to think in terms of it. But he's had 3 years of experience in Formula 1. And
he's only 21?
Yeah, 20...
Is he 20?
He might be 21, yeah. I think he might have got old. But, he's the, I think, second youngest driver on the grid. And these are things that you have to kind of forget. I think with Lance Stroll, a lot of people often forget that the George Russells, the Lando Norris, the Albons, the Latifis, Charles of the world, the only one you can compare with him is Max Verstappen in terms of they've had to do all their learning as a driver. You could admittedly say that, maybe that's his dad's fault for kind of pushing him into Williams early, but maybe, you see an opportunity to get into F1 and you just grab it.
Exactly.
But he's had to do all his learning in the spotlight, in the scrutiny of the F1. Not many. F2 and F3 is getting a bit more kind of publicity and, mistakes and people scrutinise. Probably more that Mick Schumacher's in the paddock with obviously the Schumacher name, so therefore press go more and then like, well, as we're here, we might as well,
look at some of these other kids.
Yeah, invest in it a bit more. But, Max and Lance had to do their growing up. All their mistakes were on the prime slot on Sky Sports in the main race, under the scrutiny of that. And he's also had the pressure of being, only there because of his dad's money and pay driver. Admittedly, he's probably only in Racing Point because of his dad's money. But he certainly didn't do bad in a Williams that he would have been kind of kicked out, I think, on his performances.
No.
And he's the second youngest ever podium sitter with that 2017 one in Baku. Go from there. Look, is Lance setting the world alight? No. Is he on the level of like a Max Verstappen? No. And so that's why you've seen the difference in his career, obviously. But you've now put him in a very decent car. His big issue last year was qualifying. He's currently beating Sergio Perez 2-1 in qualifying.
Yep. In
the first two races. He has beaten... He only has beaten Checo once in a race.
Also, he retired from the first race.
Retired from the first one, and then he was, I think, just getting his feet going in Austria. But it was a very solid and it was a very commanding performance. And I think credit needs to be given where it's due to Lance Stroll, that actually he is proving that he's a worthy talent. And, he's finishing ahead of his teammate on merit, out-qualified his teammate. So it's not... He didn't inherit a position. He worked very hard to maintain it.
Yeah, about 20 seconds ahead of 5th place Alexander Albon, I believe. Yeah. Very solid. Credit where credit is due. Lance Stroll, the man, very under a lot of pressure. Public perception of him is very low at the moment, I think it's fair to say, with the Sebastian Perez rumours. But yeah, dealt with that pressure, put in a very solid drive. Checo, on the other hand, P7 doesn't sound that bad, but in that car, you'd expect him to be ahead of the Ferrari and challenging for the top 5. And he didn't really do that today. He got stuck at the beginning, about in 10th, and then he progressed to 7th after the first stops. Well, second stops after the inters. And didn't do much there. I think he was about a second off Vettel in the end, so he wasn't miles off being the Ferrari, but you'd expect him to be
beating that Ferrari. Yeah, it's a weird one something I always characterise with Sergio Perez's career is that he maximises results when, the opportunity comes. First week, admittedly, I think he was screwed over by team strategy in terms of they didn't pit him under safety car, so left him as almost this lamb to slaughter to be kind of overtaken at the end of the Grand Prix. But then in week 2, he was incredible, in fairness. No performance, but went for a risky overtake on Albon, didn't come off, and then ended up in 6th rather than 5th, and didn't manage to secure that 4th position. And then this week just dropped at the start and then had no pace. It might just have been he couldn't find a setup. I know in qualifying that he suffered from dizziness. So I don't know if that just unsettled him, that he didn't feel right in the car this weekend. But yeah, it was... Lance did what everyone expected Sergio to do this weekend, and I think that's credit where's credit due. I still think over the course of the season, Sergio will come out top.
Who knows?
He's the better driver. But, this is what Lance has to do in the Racing Point. He has to go out and he has to beat Checo. The first person you've got to beat in your team to kind of get respect is to beat your teammate, because you're in the same machinery pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's the gauntlet set for thing. But it'd be interesting to see where Checo lands up in Silverstone in a couple of weeks, and it'd be interesting to see where that Racing Point pace is. Will they be quicker than both Red Bulls?
Maybe.
That will be an interesting one. But we move on to Red Bull, and obviously the second last team here, Max Verstappen. Installation lap, going out to get his slot on the grid.
Wanted to have a look at the advertising boards.
Yeah,
a closer look.
It was a very interesting advert.
Check out the sponsors.
Yeah, very interesting advert.
Yeah.
He looked up and he looked like he'd buggered his front suspension. He lost his front wing, and then this has to be credit. The Red Bull mechanics performed nothing other than I describe as a miracle in terms of they fixed that car in a space, I think it was about 15 minutes. That literally everyone else was on the grid, just chilled. Max had to kind of go over for the national anthem and everything, and he went over, and they managed to fix this car, and then they fixed it to the car to the extent that then after that, Max drove the absolute wheels off that car, and not literally like Kimi in Austria round 1. The wheels did stay on, but it was a superb performance by Max.
Yeah. Well, it just shows those mechanics, that Red Bull pit crew and mechanics, probably the best in the paddock. You'd probably say the Mercedes have the best engineers for designing the car, but I feel that Red Bull team are probably the best in the paddock for doing that kinds of stuff. It was unbelievable. They were saying they did an hour and a half job in 25 minutes and 25 seconds to spell. Jeez.
It was literally mind-blowing how they did it. And I think that's why it's so frustrating about Red Bull, because they've made decisions that aren't decisions that top teams make currently. And, all those people who say it's boring watching Mercedes dominate and Lewis Hamilton win all the time. Well, it's the fault of teams like Red Bull. It's the fault of teams like Ferrari, who are the chasing back. It's always easier to be the chasing back. Hungary, I know obviously Mercedes have this advantage, but they were slowly eating into it, and now it feels like the gap's going, and we'll talk about it with Alex and why another decision. But, they've got so many things that have going for them, Red Bull, but it's just, I mean, it's bad when Max Verstappen comes second and goes, that feels like a win.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible drive for him to split the Mercedes, and it probably does feel like a win, but it's bad for Red Bull's hopes that your driver that would be going for the championship is finishing second in a race behind the title challenger he would be going for in Lewis Hamilton, and going, that feels like a win. That shows how far your car off is against Mercedes.
Yeah. I'm sure Christian Horner would be saying the exact same thing, to be honest. they need to get in some upgrades this season. Because obviously next year you have the same cars, and if they don't back up their ideas this year, it's going to be much of the same. Lewis Hamilton, 8-time world champion in 2021.
Yep. And now for the elephant in the room, Alexander Albon. It's just so frustrating because I'm going to go from it a different angle this time. Because George was right. You know, he's competed against Alex through his career. He's been good throughout the junior series. People I know who've watched junior Formula more in detail than what I have done over the years know that there is something about Alex Albon that is decent there. But Red Bull have AlphaTauri, which is basically this gem of a team where basically the results don't matter. They're not challenging for things. If they do okay in the midfield, that's good. But it's this place where they can put their juniors to get kind of this experience in Formula One. You know, Pierre Gasly coming into the team, Alexander coming into the team. You know, Daniel Kvyat, Max Verstappen in the past, Sebastian Vettel in the past started there, Daniel Ricciardo. You know, this perfect team that they've got there to go, here, you're in F1, you can get used to driving an F1 car, you can learn the tracks, you can start learning your way in Formula One outside the pressure of a big team that is Red Bull that you would have to perform from the word go. Well, this is where I'm going back to decisions they don't make as a big team. Promoting Alexander Albon now, I'm going to say it is a mistake. Alexander Albon should not have got that Red Bull seat at Spa last year. Yes, he's done okay, and a lot of people are going, well, he's doing better than Pierre Gasly. Well, that's not the benchmark that you compete in someone against, is it? Pierre Gasly, everyone agreed that his performances weren't good enough for a top team. Why are you going, well, he was better than Gasly? Well, yeah, but you've got to more compare it to how was Daniel Ricciardo. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo was much further along his career in Formula One, but this is what I mean in terms of, you know, not thinking like a big team. Red Bull isn't the place where they allow the young drivers to develop and improve. They did do it with Max Verstappen because Max Verstappen is a very special driver, and at no time do I think Alex Albon will be on the level of Max Verstappen because he's already older than him and nowhere near the same ability of him. He's finished a lap down to his teammate in a minute in this race, and it's incredibly unfair on Alex Albon actually putting him in this position because he's just going to get ridiculed. You know, at the moment people are defending him, but people are going to, his performances, I'm pretty sure, are going to stay like this. Yeah. I can't see them getting better or significantly better compared to Max. And again, you know, that second driver, Valtteri Bottas, when 2018 he was a fluff, he copped it. 2017, 2019 he was a good number 2 driver, where basically Mercedes were able to use Bottas in ways to help Lewis Hamilton win races. At the moment, Max, because he drove an incredible race, you know, it didn't matter that Alex Albon was miles off down the track. People going, he went from 13th to 5th. Yeah, but he overtook everyone he should have done.
It's in the second best car on the grid.
Exactly. He should be overtaking all those persons. He should have been able to catch Lance Stroll and overtake him and finish P4. Anything lower than P4 at the moment for Alexander Albon is a bad day at the office for me in that one, no matter where you end up qualifying in terms of that performance. But, you know, they need... Going back to the development issue that I said about Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, well, Max Verstappen has a lot of pressure on a guy that isn't... He's 5 years, so he's experienced within it. But you're putting all that development pressure because Pierre Gasly and Alex Albon, they can't be good at developing a car, an F1 car, because they've hardly ever driven one. Gasly had 1 season in Toro Rosso AlphaTauri. Alex Albon had half a season in that car and then going into the Red Bull. He can't be good at giving good driver feedback because he hasn't been in it long enough to do it compared to what Daniel Ricciardo was. So they need to get a Vettel, they need to get a Perez and Magnussen to go into that seat and push Max, but also make sure that the driver is one of the best feedbacks to improve a car because he's driving it. And it just seems Red Bull are failing. Looking at this as an F1 fan, they're failing the sport because they're making stupid decisions when they have a very good junior team to let their juniors develop over 2 or 3 seasons and then decide whether they're good enough. So that's what I feel on Red Bull. It's a little bit frustrating about them as a team.
Yeah. It's quite a passionate rant.
Yeah! Angry. But it's true though, isn't it?
Yeah, I completely agree. There's that development that we've heard that Albon's been struggling with the car. Is he necessarily doing much to help the team perfect the car for him? Or is he just saying it's not working,
Yeah, and I suppose George Russell's point said that, Red Bull are making Albon look like an idiot. Well, I suppose they kind of are, because they're telling an inexperienced guy to go into a top car and perform at a top level, which, unless you're a very good driver, which I don't think Alex Albon is, he's talented. Don't get me wrong, he's a good driver, but he's not. I wouldn't look at Alexander Albon and class him in future world champion category. As of yet, he might develop into that because we never know. Jenson Button developed into it. Nico Rosberg developed into it. But, he just isn't showing that at the moment, and he's in a bit of an unfair situation.
Well, we look at Mercedes, who have decided to keep Bottas for another year, at least, and give George his 3rd season next year. I don't know why I had to think about that. His 3rd season at Williams, not rushing his development, getting him that time at Williams. So when he does join Mercedes, he will be hopefully very prepared for that top seat.
Because, look at the difference. At the moment, everyone's going, George Russell, amazing. He's qualified P12, incredible performance, and he's got all this no pressure. If he performs well, it's an amazing achievement. If he doesn't perform well, everyone goes, well, the Williams isn't that competitive. But if he's in the Mercedes seat, there's a lot of pressure on him. And in fairness, I think George Russell would adapt a lot better than what Alex Albon has to the situation. But the point stands.
Yeah. Yes.
But Mercedes
be in a class of their own, league of their own. It only takes a mess up at the start for Bottas not to finish out of the top 2. I'll start with Bottas. Finished. He did jump start, but within the legal limits, about 0.2 of a second or something. Didn't cross the white line. Avoided a penalty. But it was a horrific start. Fell back to 8th, I believe, or somewhere around there. Had to fight his way back throughout the entire race. Had to do an extra stop from Max to try to catch him on fresher tyres. Didn't get him in the end. Was then very close at the end, but didn't manage the job. Finished 3rd. Yeah, not great for Bottas. When he's the only man that can challenge Lewis, he isn't looking like the man who's going to challenge Lewis. It's days like this we appreciate Nico Rosberg even more, I believe, is the thing to say. Yeah. He struck a very frustrated figure as well post-race. He was very disappointed in himself.
I just don't... You see, on days where Lewis could have a day like that and still finish 2nd, Valtteri has days like that, and he made a real hash up a mess of working his way through the field. And he had that free pit stop to go, and obviously Lewis did it last year and made it work, where Bottas did it this year, and this is a clear sign of advantage. I think you have to ask yourself with Lewis Hamilton, if Lewis Hamilton was in Valtteri's position, would he have got 2nd? I think yes. They go from there. Obviously, you can go ifs, buts, and maybes in terms of that. With Valtteri Bottas, he has to at least match Lewis's level every race. And he did that in race 1. And he hasn't done that since.
Yeah.
admittedly, there's only 2 races, and it is too early to write off a championship with obviously the coronavirus and everything. This season still could go crazy and throw up some things from there. But if things go to plan, everything goes smoothly on that front, and it's just Valtteri Bottas, Hamilton on track, I'd walk into the British Grand Prix and go, there you go, Lewis, what's that? Well, that's the World Drivers' title.
Yeah, Silverstone, Valtteri needs to make a dent there.
It's a Lewis stronghold.
He needs minimum seconds. Ideally, he needs a win. If he doesn't get a win and just gets 2-second performances, it's not a disaster because Lewis is very strong at Silverstone. But it's going to be all of a sudden, how many points would that be off? Quick maths. 14, 15 points off?
I think so.
So yeah, already starting to see the gap grow. But yeah. On the other hand, Lewis Hamilton. He's an 8-time champion at Hungary, and we saw why, basically. No one could touch him.
I'm just going to say that, just to show the class of Lewis Hamilton in that Mercedes there, quite early you can see the graining of the tyres. There was kind of like this darker line, wasn't there, around the middle of the tyre. Lewis Hamilton got to the end of his first stint and looked like they'd done maybe about 5 laps.
Yeah.
It looks stupid in terms of the tyre wear, and they were using DAS as well through it, which obviously helps with these things, and hopefully I think it's getting the tyres into a window and operating on that front. But Lewis Hamilton's performance, new lap records in pole, new lap records on race day. He was flawless from those all weekend.
Yep. Did he lead every single lap?
No, because Max Verstappen stayed out at the start. So I think he led every lap bar 1.
Oh, so close.
Yeah.
Trying to catch that Senna record of 19. But yeah, he basically led every lap. Because, it was just dominant. You can't, there's so many words you can describe it with.
I think what you do for the next 2 seasons is you do this, you sit down, you just sit back and you go, I am watching one of the best drivers to have ever driven in the sport, and soon he's going to retire. I'm going to enjoy every race, even if it means that he's absolutely smashing it, because when he's gone, I'll realise how good a driver Lewis Hamilton was and how lucky I was to watch Formula 1 when he was driving in it.
Oh,
I think that's it.
Getting all emotional.
But he is. He is, and there will always be doubters, and you can argue that the benefit of falling is Sebastian Vettel or Fernando Alonso falling into that Mercedes seat. You could easily be talking about them beating those, but the same for them. It's a joy to watch those guys racing, but the fact is that Lewis Hamilton's in that car. He's maximising his advantage statistically and with the kind of championships as well. It is a privilege to absolutely watch him in F1 and smash it, and he was just so good. He just makes no mistakes.
Yeah.
Which I think, because he makes it look easy, people think it is. But I think you look at Valtteri Bottas and you go,
and you realise
he's still in an amazing car, but Max, someone else's amazing performance was still able to outperform him.
Yeah.
Where Lewis is just like, let's go for a nice Sunday drive. But that is the review of the team. So I hope you enjoy it. One point actually, it was on RedBull, wasn't it? What was the... Albon was potentially going to be disqualified, but he wasn't because...
I don't know.
Did you not?
No,
I'm pretty sure it was...
in the notebook, Ted bumped into Christian.
That's what I was going
and
with.
Christian was like, it was an innocent mistake. That didn't really dry the floor at all. I think one of the mechanics was burning his leg or something like that. I don't know. But it was like, I think they proved it wasn't intentional, and they hardly dried the thing at all. I think they dried it slightly, but they proved it wasn't intentional.
There you go. That's that on that one. So on to driver of the day, and I've remembered. So your driver of the day, I did a poll. I had Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Lance Stroll was the three, and then other. The other was very popular with Kevin Magnussen, and I think it was pretty much all of Kevin Magnussen. There was one for Alexander Albon, but less said about that, no, but Kevin Magnussen received 16% of the vote. Lance Stroll was 14%, and Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton actually were 35% each.
True.
So, Stephen,
tie.
I say to you, who was your driver of the day?
It's a very tough one for me.
I think it's a tough one all round because there were some brilliant performances.
Yeah. I'm just going to have to go for Max Verstappen. 7th to 2nd and splitting the Mercedes. For me, driver of the day. But honourable mentions to Lance Stroll and, of course, Lewis Hamilton. That'd be my podium of driver of the day. I
would also give... I thought Lewis was, like we said, flawless performance, amazing to watch. I think... For me, anytime Max Verstappen manages to split those Mercedes because of how good that car is a driver of the day performance for me. Because just watching those Mercedes, they are stupidly good. And yes, Valtteri did his best to kind of cock things up, but still, it was like an immense drive for Max to manage that. Kevin Magnussen also deserves an honourable mention, scoring points in that Haas car. Very unlucky with that stupid 10-second penalty. But it feels weird. I can't give him drive of the day, although for his drive and his car at this time, getting a points finish is great. It feels weird giving someone 9th drive of the day in terms of that. And Lance Stroll, it definitely is an honourable mention. But for me, I think it's an agreement. Max Verstappen, for me, I said, for any guy who splits the Mercedes, that's an incredible drive, just in the difference of where that Mercedes is to the rest of the field.
Yeah.
Race rating.
I'm going to go for 7 out of 10 for Hungary. Lots of action at the beginning, settled down a bit in the middle to later stages, picked up a little bit at the end with Bottas chasing Max. But yeah, 7 out of 10. Lewis masterclass, but there wasn't a fight for the lead. Not too much drama. I think races, unless there are mental battles in the midfield, like constantly throughout, I think races are going to struggle to get above a 7 out of 10 because a lot of exciting races, like we've spoken about it before, is that battle for the lead or at least some competitive kind of change. At the moment, if it's just Lewis, as much as the exciting talent is to come, it just takes a slight edge off a race because you want to see people competing for the top prize, which is the win. Yeah, exactly.
So, we're going to give it a 7 out of 10. But that rounds off the Race Review podcast, and I think it was a little bit longer today. Sorry about the couple of rants in there. It was maybe a little bit of a ranty episode, but I think we're getting to that stage. There are some slight frustrations in going there, and it's unfair on those drivers because they are human beings, and they're put in the spotlight, and they're maybe not being treated in the fairest possible way. But let us know in the comments below what you thought of the race, what you thought of the points raised within the podcast, and what you thought of the race in general. And what was your drive of the day if you didn't vote in our Twitter poll, and what was your race rating? But if they're new around here, or haven't done so already, we mentioned it at the start, but Stephen, what can they do?
They can like, they can subscribe, and you can kick that like button, bell notification. But you can also ding it. Ding that bell.
Ding that bell. Don't kick it. Ding it.
Well, I'm just giving the options out there.
Okay, you can kick it if you like. But ding, kick, whatever, that bell. And we will see you guys next time or tomorrow if you want to tune in for the F1 Fantasy Hungary GP review, where we go through all the top fantasy points and let you guys know how the league's going and how you guys are doing teams, as well as probably some recommendations going forward.
If you want your team rated, be sure to leave in the comments as well.
Definitely. We've had a few kind of entries to rate your team, so make sure you add in there. But anyway, guys, that's it from us today. So for now, you F1 fans, keep racing!